chicken talk. There we go on a Friday. More than ITAM talk, right? ITAM speak. Welcome. Appreciate everyone being here. Well, we have guests today. We have Deanna and Rob, which greatly appreciate them contributing. I think we've had some awesome topics. And before we dig into our topics for today, which is about audits, seem to be unexpected, accidental, seem to be being brought online, responsibilities. Figure out, okay, how do we prioritize? How do we work through this, right? Before we go through all that, let's do a few introductions. I myself am Mr. Bill, 30-year plus practitioner, asset management, software asset management, configuration management. I wish I did it before it was ever cool. All those hot topics we have today. But being able to say, okay, how we help practitioners, an old end user support guy that actually said, okay, was told, I say, now manage everything. And now I've done that as a consultant for 30 plus years. And now we're live on YouTube and LinkedIn. So appreciate being here and help thousands of people on that side. But before we go any further into our topic for today, Deanna, why don't you introduce yourself, and then we'll go to Rob, and then we'll circumvent. We'll not circumvent. We'll do full circle, and we'll continue discussion. There's no telling what's going to come out of my tongue today. It's all good.
Hi, I'm Deanna Hennigar. I've also been working in IT asset management and service management. Then I realized I even started way before that in desktop publishing. So it's amazing how long we've been working with computers in various fields and roles and responsibilities. And once you get into ITAM, we all found we really don't want to leave it. There's something so exciting about working with the assets and supporting the service people that support the business. Rob?
I love it.
Yeah, I'm Rob Collins. I am a 30-year plus practitioner in IT asset management and IT in general, just a variety of different positions, functioning in desktop support and IT asset management over the course of that time period. Going back when I was in the Marines, going forward into 2 state of Florida government agencies, and then for about 5 years in practice with a consulting firm. And yeah, so IT asset management for all of us folks in their career is a bit like falling into the Sarlacc pit a little, but at least if you can count the other bodies that are in it with you, then you're active and you're working. So at any rate, back over to you, Bill.
No, I appreciate it. Because again, this is about having fun. We're having an open discussion because how did this all start? It started the ITAM Kitchen because we love getting together and talking. It's like, and from that being able to say, you know what, let's go live. Let's let other people hear what it's all about, because we don't talk about these things. These are kind of those little hidden secrets in the topics. And this accidental seemed to be the whole scenario behind it. Actually, we have 2 scenarios that are actually happening in parallel. We have a financial insurance company. We have an insurance organization that is actually moving from ServiceNow to Freshworks. So they're actually making that happen. It's like, okay, what we have ITAM, SAM, how did Cmdb get into this? It's because you had a fully functional ServiceNow system, and this Cmdb really wasn't functional for them. It was kind of there, I'll say rudimentary. And the executives made a financial decision that we're no longer going to pay for ServiceNow licensing. We're going to go to Freshworks. Okay, decision made. There it is. But from the Cmdb, it's like, by the way, you told the asset manager, you've been doing really well in hardware and software asset management. It's great. We're going to add Cmdb to your plate. It's not hard. You can make it happen. We've been talking about that the entire month, and we're having a blast with it.
Yeah.
So that's scenario number 1. The scenario number 2, similar but different. It's a small to mid-sized bank based in the U.S., just to be more specific there, and being able to say, okay, you're going from Sharewell, the products being end of life this year in 2026, and they chose to go to Freshworks for licensing cost, and they say, okay, here's a product to help us get by for now. And that person also, he was doing hardware, software, asset management, and said, oh, by the way, Cmdb is now for you too. Like, do what? We've been talking about these topics in many different forms, lots of different identities as far as alignment, how we talk with stakeholders, how we look at data, how we do normalization. If you've seen the episodes for the last few weeks, that's what we've been talking about. And today is about, we'll say, our day job. Keep in mind, these are software asset managers, hardware asset managers, and more in this case, they do both. but they're software asset management, and they need to take care of the software audits as we move forward. And that's what today's about, is how we're working. It's like, what's there? What do we do? What's that next step? So from there, what comes to mind? Deanna, you want to kick it off? What comes to mind with this type of scenario? Because that's a lot. We have a lot going on, right? It's easy to get overwhelmed.
One of the first things as a software asset manager is you have to look at each contract and what each software is doing, because you have a different position with each one. Does the software license allow you to do downgrade rights, or do you have maintenance on it for your upgrade rights? Are you allowed to use some of your cloud products when they move into SaaS? Can you use some of your SaaS licenses to downgrade? That one I don't know. I didn't look that one up yet. But it's understanding when somebody comes knocking at the door, do you understand the licensing position you have as per the contract for what they're asking you? Without that knowledge, you have to do a lot of scrambling. Luckily, they give you 15 to 30 days to go figure things out. But you have to remember to answer that email right away. Or if the letter comes into a contract, right away, do a response. Because the longer you take, the harder they're going to dig.
That's great. That's great. Rob, what comes to mind?
Well, there's a few things that come to mind. One is, one of the first things, if you do receive any kind of an audit letter or something like that, what you really need to do is you need to sit down, inform leadership, and there are several stakeholders that you're going to want to bring to the table before you formulate a formal response. You can do an interim response, and many places advise that you don't until you've got that formalized response. Because then you need to go back and you just look at how well have you been tracking your software. Where is it? How many installations versus how many are you entitled to? And to do that, and quite frankly, from the perspective of the environment that I've seen so far, the whole reason why people are relying on Cmdbs is because they aren't doing a good job of tracking what they buy, and they're not doing a really good job of tracking where they put it. So that's why they're going to rely on the Cmdb. It's a fallback position is what it is. Cmdb is an operational lifecycle look. It's not an overall asset lifecycle look. So assuming that you're not doing all of that, you need to determine what those positions are. So you're going to need to pull people together, put them, in a room, and you need to determine what those positions are. Do some research, reach out, right? Reaching out to the vendor isn't always the best idea, because often this can trigger an audit, depending on who they are, what the software is, and whether or not they've got really high levels of audit activity, right? And lately, I think that there have been a few that have been increased. Oracle is one of those, right? So that's just one thing, right? The other thing is this, right? Let's say you're not under this risk at the moment, right? At some point, you could be. And so if you hired any of us, and we were going to come in and step into this role, I mean, one of the first things that I'd want to do is I'd want to sit down first with purchasing and accounting, and I want a full list of what you bought, right? Because that doesn't show up in a Cmdb. It never will, right? Because that's not the place where you put that stuff, right? And then second, you're going to want to sit down with the people that are administering the operational environment. That's your infrastructure people and your networking people. I want InfoSec at the table, and I definitely want desktop software. Whoever is the one that's actually doing the installations of those things. And if you don't have asset management at the time, that would be a really good time to sit down and put that program in place, and then begin starting to build that inventory and look at that full manifest of what you bought, because that's the stuff that you're going to be counting against. Yeah,
and I think it's also important, right? So, because we have established software asset management programs in both the environments, right? It's also, to your point, is the uniformity. And I think that's also the key points you're both bringing to bear, is the uniformity to say, how is everyone using the system? How are they using the data, as well as what's forthcoming, right? And the software positions on that part.
Yeah.
Because it's also the ability to say, let's start validating the data prior to bringing it online. Well, we're bringing it online, let's start validating. And that validation, everyone, I don't know about you guys, I know when I have a problem brought to me, as far as, okay, I need a new workload. If someone comes to me, it's like, I need you to validate what this is to make sure it comes in the system correctly. I'm more adept to help that person say, okay, I'm going to be pushing it, but okay, you need to validate it. I get it's going to help me in the long run versus saying you need to go provide me this information.
Mhm.
Right? I think that goes a long ways as well. And it's all about, okay, how do we position the dialogue, right? How do we put that? Because our workload, keep in mind, we had the Cmdb added to our workload. We're already doing this. We have reports. We weren't perfect, but it's like, okay, we're moving forward. And it's being able to say, what else is there? And it's not a, yeah, you could say, okay, AI is going to replace and things like this. This is not an AI discussion. This is more about validity of saying what type of role, who's needed for the roles. I would think too. Does that come to what comes to mind when I say something like roles and who's involved and that part? What comes to mind there?
One of the things that comes to mind to me is, are you still using spreadsheets? Have you been able to learn how to take your spreadsheet, make it into a template, and upload it into your system? Because the more you move yourself off your manual process, I mean, the Cmdb cannot read your spreadsheet. It can only read what's out in the environment. So if you're being tasked with an audit, if you're going back to spreadsheets, a lot of them do not hold up in court anymore. And they will put sniffers on your entire system to see what they can find. And they may actually go back to the vendors to see if you actually recorded everything correctly. So hopefully your software asset manager does a lot of due diligence and in understanding why they must capture the license. Second thing that comes to mind is, are we purchasing through a central purchasing or central purchasing catalog or not? Are people, where are all your ad hoc licenses? Why are they finding things that you didn't know existed? Software manager doesn't necessarily play in the Cmdb, and since it's now new to ITAM, they may not even know what it does.
No, absolutely. No, I did see there was something that came in from Pranchu. So let's bring that up for a second and help that for a dialogue. Let's see if I can clean up the screen a little bit. So coming from India, right? Some of the greatest pain points, legacy vendors and monopoly and SAM market is a concern. It's been a concern for 20 plus years, but yes, I totally agree. It hasn't changed. Complex licensing of some publishers and doing fine in an audit and matching all data points. Absolutely. And I think that's exactly what we've been talking about on that part. And the last part is we have part of that being cut off. Let's see if I can fix that at all with everything going on here. ITAM is a great field on how we are moving from legacy software to cloud environments and gives new perspectives. So appreciate that. Any comments we want to say about Pranchu's comment?
There are a couple of them. One, for instance, is this, right? Just understand that that's a complexity that is in the software market, right? And understand that if you yourself are not an expert, for instance, in all of the software, all of the publishers, right? And what you need to do is, and I think we're going to talk a bit about where do you put your focus initially, right? And you can look at this from the perspective of, let's say, if you are doing the due diligence and you're working with your finance team, right? Then you should understand what's our spend look like. Okay, like if you want to pick a starting point, top 5 publishers. So what does that mean? Top 5 publishers with regard to spend, or it could be top 5 publishers with regard to the impact of the business across the environment. And then you want to go there. Now, if you don't have licensing experts in place for each of those vendors across the product lines that you have to sit down and consider in the event of audit, or that you want to do, you want to be proactive and get a defense going ahead of time and get your accountability and the correctness and the compliance right, then look at it from that perspective, because that's where you're going to get the biggest bang for the buck in your effort right there. And that's the main focus around that. And then he was talking about what else? Let's see, I agree field, but I think that's it. Let's just talk about just the licensing for publishers and the really good starting point. Because as has been said before, you're not going to boil the ocean. Absolutely not. Even if you had AI, and there is some applicability for ITAM, there is even applicability for some AI-related exercises and work within the 2 scenarios that we have here. we could go into that later if you want, or it could be
Oh, sure.
or it could be a separate session. But let's take it from there.
Oh, absolutely. Now, let me ask Deanna, let me ask a question like this. Of the 5 publishers that are being referenced, right? Would you choose the 5 top vendors that you already have managed to compare that within the system, or would you use 5 new vendors and try to get that software position within this new Freshworks environment?
Well, if we already have a good understanding of our top 5 and we're managing them well, I would go move into the second top 5, because we want to be able to not leave any gaps as we go down our list. So we apply what we've done with the first top 5 and then do the same with the next top 5. Because sometimes we have 500 different types of licenses in our environment, and we eventually want to get to all of them. They do have some risk involved. And every time something gets upgraded, we may not know if there's a hole in the environment. We may not have done our due diligence in our QA and UAT testing once they've come in. And the more we understand about our positions, the better off we are. But you're not going to forget the top 5. You're already working them well.
Absolutely.
You are.
Yeah, exactly. And it's being put in place. Rob, did you want to add any more? Or?
Well, I do. Another point of consideration is, because between the 2 scenarios, you're going from what is described as one of the most robust systems in the industry, going from ServiceNow down to Freshworks. And the driver for that is it just costs too much, so we can't do this, right? You've got to operate within your budget, and there's a big pain point right there. And then the other one is Sharewell, right? Which you may or you may not have a really good, robust CMDB in place around that. I actually was doing work interfacing Managed Engine Asset Explorer with Sharewell, and that was quite a few years ago. But so in regard to, let's say, an asset management database, I had a great one, right? In so much as a CMDB goes, I think that they were still learning about it at the time. It was just about ticket fulfillment. That was the big driver there. But there were successful strategies for getting the 2 products to talk to each other and utilize those as resources. So if you have this and you have the associated financial spend, right, then that's great. But if you don't, right, then that starting point becomes go to the asset management database, go to that repository and work with finance. Get what you've bought and how much, right? And now look at the distribution of those products throughout your agency among the top 5 publishers. Let's just start there, right? And once you do that, then you start to get a much more clear picture. And you can then, if you want, put together a plan for success across those, and then you can then extend that project to some of the others, what you call addressing the long tail, okay? Of your software spend and of your installations, of your licensing and compliance.
And I think there's something to be said for that as well, right? It's also validating not just the individuals or which vendors there are. It's also making sure, again, we were talking about stakeholders before and stakeholder alignment, right?
Yeah.
What's forthcoming as far as those audits, or not just even audit, it's also, okay, what renewals are forthcoming?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, please be tracking your renewals.
Yes.
If you weren't doing a good job of tracking your software purchases and whatnot before, please let this be your opportunity to just to get a hold on that, because if not, sometimes those renewals, what you do in a renewal could be an audit trigger.
Yep. And also, if you don't renew in time, you may lose your lower pricing as well. And all of a sudden, you're now paying $10 more on a renewal. And that's really not too much if you have 10 licenses. But if you have 1,000 licenses or 100,000 licenses, it gets real expensive real quick by missing one date.
Well, so let me ask a question. Bring an interesting point up on the cost, right? Let's go down that tangent, come right back.
That's the
renewals, you're right, lower costs. Well, I've been hearing that when it comes to lower costs, as far as how much you're paying for, I've been told the price is the price these days. They don't really no one's giving discounts.
Nope.
One vendor has stopped giving discounts.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So from that, that's also something to keep in mind is it's not about maybe getting a lower cost initially, but think about the penalty you'll have by doing it after the fact.
Right. The other penalty, if you don't renew in time, everybody relying on that piece of software cannot work. Because sometimes it will turn it right off.
Or it's the budget.
But yeah.
Budgetary impacts, right? And I think that's important from the audits because keep in mind there's a shift happening. So there's movements. You may have disgruntled employees because of shifts. You may have vendors aware of, okay, well, you're doing a major platform change. You're doing okay, but how good are you doing? It's that opportunity to knock on the door and say, you know what? We're Microsoft. It's time for that renewal. What the heck? Let's spice this up a little bit.
Yep.
No, Microsoft would never do such a thing, or Oracle, or SAP, or anybody, right? So as we think about, when you think about the banking, right? Let's go down the banking industry. What comes to mind when it comes to SAM, the some things we need to make sure, sorry about it, everybody's just calling in now. And being able to say, okay, what should I be focusing on within the bank versus the insurance? Because we already have two different focuses. Will they be similar? Will they be different between the two different environments?
I think there's a lot more in-house applications in a bank than there are within an insurance company, only because a lot of banks don't like to share how they're doing things. There's a lot of privacy around a bank. So one of those considerations is don't forget to spend some time on your own licensing. You don't have to pay anybody on the outside, but are you upgrading your own software? Can other people upgrade? No. Can your other employees who are using the software upgrade with you? You have to follow all these ICC regulations, all these different regulations that are coming down. What about now cryptocurrency moving its way in? There are rules and regs and licenses all about these different things, especially in banking. That has changed in the last 5 years. But they're all licenses.
I think I lost connection. I think I lost connection for a few minutes, so a lot of thoughts.
Well, it's a bit about the difference about the approach for the banking institution versus the insurance. That was really the crux. What should be the prioritization on that? Because we've talked about prioritization, the top 5 vendors, we've talked about the stakeholders and how we look at the contracts, look at the renewals.
So we're talking about prioritizing the work. Are we talking about prioritizing the defense, building the defense?
Little both. I'd say little both, right?
Okay. All right. So first priority is examine what you bought, right? That's the first priority. Because if you don't know what it is that you've bought within your system, there's no way you could have any kind of accountability. That's the first thing, right? And then the second thing is prioritize that discovery. Since we're talking about CMDBs of varying degrees of like trustworthiness and confidence, then I think that's probably going to be the next thing that you want to do, right? If you don't, or you can't get a lock on what you bought, then that becomes the priority. Get the discovery in place so that you could at least scan your environment and you can put together a report or a dashboard that tells you, tells your stakeholders, what have we got installed? What's being in place? What's in the cloud, right? I need to know what we have in order to manage it. That's the bottom line there for that. And then you can begin to then start looking at, all right, do we have expertise in-house? If we've got these 12 products across these 5 vendors, do we have expertise around the licensing here? If not, get somebody to sit down, a couple of folks, if you've got legal expertise in place, somebody that understands contracts and those terms and conditions, get them into the table so that you understand what your rights are, what your entitlements are. I wouldn't necessarily go running back to the same vendor that's going to probably pull an audit, but I would seek out some expertise. If you don't have it in-house and you can't train it up in time, go seek a consultant, somebody that's done this a lot before. and who's met with great success. There's a few folks out there that have done that. I've done it. When we talk about the $500,000 penalty that I got reduced to 30K, that's just one example. And there's a whole bunch of us out here. And if you've been reading the news or anything lately, there's a whole lot of those talented and knowledgeable folks out there that are looking for work. And if you have a need, the two of you can meet.
Well, it's worth the price of admission, right? It's as far as hiring them on, right? And for that credibility, there's something to be said for that. Absolutely, and you're right. It is a good time to validate also the data you have. That's also what we're saying, right?
You need to do that, because if you don't validate or you can't validate that data, then you're not working on a solid premise.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Any other? So as we think about that part, right, we're talking about the resource, because we just tied into resources. That's really what we're putting in place, right? As we're doing the audit, identify, Robbie, I think you brought up a great point. Some additional resources you need. There's validation, helping that baseline. That's important. I think it's also important for a regulatory part. So let's hit Sam on the regulatory part, because that is a very hot topic today.
Yeah.
It's insane. So where would you guys like to take that? Rob, you want to start on that topic?
Well, I don't know. I kind of get caught on something in my head, right? It was an experience that I had a while ago at one of the state agencies, right? And that is, in order to get that solid viewpoint, you have to understand what tools are capable of showing you all that you need to know regarding your installations, right? And not everything can do it. Like, for instance, there's IBM, right? This is the example, right? IBM has the tools that you use to manage the licensing and the installations of those, depending on the product, right? But you can't necessarily fully articulate, you can't discover and you can't fully articulate if you're just using scripting, for instance. If you're just using PowerShell commands, you're just not going to get that. And to Deanna's point around that and around a spreadsheet, even if you did work out, and engineer the perfect prompt that will tell you where all your IBM is within your environment, right? If it's going into a spreadsheet, that spreadsheet's stale the moment you save and close.
Yep.
So that's the big thing on that. So, and I think that's enough to move forward on the discussion with right there.
Yeah, I mean, IBM wants you to capture the data every 3 days. So you know your position. Yep.
Yeah, and I say real time is the way to go. Just if you can do real time, do real time. But yeah, go ahead, Deanna.
I was going to say some of the other things is get ahead of your audits. Get yourself an audit team in-house.
Yes.
And audit yourself. Audit your top 10 once a month, or your top, and go through rotation. This way, when you do get an audit, you understand your position. You understand what's missing. So while you're doing your first top 10, you already know how to audit that. When you get to the next 5, you already know how to audit that.
And to that point especially, right? If you can get your view on the data and you can get maximum confidence, for crying out loud, put up a dashboard people can look at. And if you do that, for instance, and you use the tech to ping your systems every so often, we set up a system a long time ago. We were able to ping 6 different times a day, right? And we worked that out with security. So we had that fresh data up there all the time. So the dashboard would move. The needle would move with every installation, with every deinstall. It would move with everything that happened within the activity in the enterprise, right? So why purposely be blind to it? If it's possible to do it, it doesn't take a whole lot of technical effort. Put the dashboards in place and just get that communication going.
Well, in that, to your point, that communication is key.
Yeah.
Throughout the entire duration, and from an Audit Shield, that's one of the best things you can have internally from an awareness.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, we talk about awareness externally. Make sure we talk with vendors externally. You have that, but when you have that internal dialogue, if all of a sudden somebody does a knee-jerk reaction and pulls an audit for whatever reason, or they want to, that renewal all of a sudden pops up and you need to do it 6 months early, it's going to happen. Those unexpected moments, expect them is the best way to put it.
There's something else around that.
Yeah, go
I
for
think
it.
this is critically important, right? Especially when it comes to the communication. The communication to the internal team should be robust, and it should be frequent, and it should be constantly updated, right? You want to consult and inform internally all the time. However, if you're going to be dealing with the vendor, single point of communication needs to be decided on in-house, and no other communication between you and the vendor, between you and those who are auditing.
Because once you put the second person in, they may ask the wrong questions, things that have already been agreed upon. And then when I ask that question, go, wait a minute, maybe they don't really know what we agreed upon last time. Let's go look.
It's a very key points on all that. And keep in mind, we're talking with the vendors at this point, not just our same entitlements. So we've kind of expanded the scope, but this is also where our normal day of activities was hardware, software, asset management initially. We have had to bring on a new system. We have the Cmdb in line, so we have additional responsibilities, but still important throughout the entire. That's what we're talking about. The entire process, the entire activity as far as this onboarding for this new product, to keep that communication alive and actually even get more robust and be able to further expand it because you now have that visibility. Because there's that visibility. Maybe you didn't have the visibility and awareness before. Well, they know the project's happening. Okay, leverage it. This is your opportunity to grow and thrive in that area. It's some people don't think about it like, oh, okay, I'm going to add more work to my workload. Actually, it's just the opposite. Yes, on one side, you're going to have a workload a little bit in there, but that awareness, if you have the rest of the team saying they can help you, is that a hindrance or is that helpful? Right?
And what if your vendor doesn't like the new platform you got? What if the vendor already knows the holes in the new platform?
Well, I'm just going to call out one of the examples, right? We're used to work with Flexera, ServiceNow, or we're used to work with, three of us all are, right? We're seasoned on that side. And we know, for example, I'm just going to call it out, and it's not the deficiency, but there's a lot of products with this deficiency. If there's IBM internally, more than likely capturing Fresh or the IBM licensing in Freshworks I will say it's not going to be the same as ServiceNow. It's not going to be the same from the discoverable of Flexera. It's just not. So to your point, Deanna, having that critical part, that's a gap, and having for clarity on that. I'm just using it as an example, right?
I think the only one that really is bettable is ILMT. And then I don't know if there are others that are third party out there that don't do so good. And I mean, and then there are vendors who have actually built up internally their own IBM discovery tools and licensing management processes, and they're really good, right? I mean, they really are. But that's a paid for consultancy answer there. And I'll just leave it at that. But you're not necessarily going to do it. That was a painful lesson I had a long time ago. I did all I could to discover it. And the worst of it was, as much as I was trying to kind of root out where it was everywhere in our system, I wasn't even getting help from leadership. I wasn't even getting help from our technical staff. I was working alone, on that, trying to defeat that other audit. Work with each other, help each other. It's the effort is for your company, it's for your reputation, it's for your team, and it's to save cost on those ridiculous audits.
One company was looking into different vendors, and when we gave them the vendor list, they automatically crossed off anybody who wasn't in industry for at least 5 years. Said if you were in industry for 5 years, you don't know enough to be our vendor. You don't know enough to be our software company or whatever.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow. So as we're having some great dialogue here, we also had another comment come in. So we'll make sure to post this. How can we optimize IT costs during renewals, and can vendors give us more discounts, or it depends upon the contracts? I think it's a kind of a statement / question there in the end. What comes to mind? I mean, I think we've hit this a little bit already for some of the discussion, but does anything else come to mind for this?
Yeah, it's going to depend on the publisher and the product. Really, it's what it's going to come down to. I mean, unless you get, let's say, a reseller, for instance, that gets a massive discount, and can pass that along to you, that's another thing that you can consider. Beyond that, though, yeah, it really is going to come from the publisher versus product.
Or finding software that does the same thing and is not the main person, but they're newer to the industry, but they still have their CAD, or they still have a PDF.
I did it. Yes, I did. Attachmate Extra from way back in the day. The company that runs that stuff, they are audit intense. And that was a big, beautiful example of one of those exercises to reduce the penalties and really get to the bottom of it, right? And that was also one of those where my team and I had them research cheaper products that actually did more than just the job that it was looking for. Like once upon a time, in that case, it was you could run a single terminal emulation, right? But you couldn't do a print session at the same time as you were doing a communication session, right? Well, we found 3 products that let you do both, and one product in particular cost 1/3 what that software cost back in the day. And we decided, oh, we're going to move to this, and we did.
Put up with the learning curve.
We got a severe
learning curve to save the money.
Yeah, we got a severe wagging of the finger from senior management, but then they turned around 30 days later and jumped right on that product.
Yeah.
I wanted to, yeah, absolutely. So let me take a little bit different spin on this one too, because I think this is, we were talking about the costs and how people don't, the organizations are not providing the discounts they used to as far as vendors, right? To organizations. It really does. It does vary, quantity, et cetera, right? So everyone says, because we say software asset management is an easy way to save money. So let's go down this little tangent. Being able to say, in this case, optimizing IT costs during renewals. If we're saying IT costs, that's different than vendor renewal cost. I want to make sure we're differentiating our costs or expenditures here, right? And there's one thing to, well, there's one thing to actually manage the business, right? To understand who's using the license, et cetera, who can reuse it, right?
Yeah.
In the optimization of IT costs and expenditure, this is not about spending on the licensing to me on that renewal. This is more about who's actually using the product.
Okay.
Who should be using the product, right? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. It's something that Deanna said a little while ago as well. I kind of build on that. Really, what you're talking about, that's like, Deanna, you mentioned we'll find an alternate product, right? Yep. And that's what kind of triggered the memory for me. But then even in this case, for instance, like, yeah, well, this is an opportunity for application rationalization. Yeah, I don't know. Who has time for that, right? Well, when you start saving money and that money is significant and your risk and your burden is way lower, then all of a sudden, maybe it's time we actually did that exercise, and that right exercise can help you tremendously. There are going to be people that are upset because they want full-blown Adobe everything when all they ever do is read and review a document. Yeah, well, the sad news is I don't care where you are in the company. If the need is this much, you satisfy the need.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's going to make some people upset or whatever, but you're saving the company, the institution, a tremendous amount of risk and money.
You can also see if they will give you a different type of licensing, with that you can have concurrent licensing. Fine, I'll take 15 seats to get in, but you'll allow me 30 licenses, but only 15 can use it at any different point in time. That would also, so you'd have to schedule when your people do, say like a DocuSign document or whatever. If you can get the different concurrent licenses, it means that I have more licenses, but you can't use them. I don't have enough seats at the house for everybody to use them at the same time. So I have to do scheduling. Scheduling would save more money.
Yeah, we did that exercise when it came to some of our Microsoft entitlements, especially around Office when it was making that transition from on desktop, when it was initially moving to a cloud offering. And I think that's what helped us there. We also did the same thing around a couple of the management tools at the IT level where you didn't have to have a license for every person, but you could just, we only expect to have, let's say, maybe 20 technicians working in the system at the same time.
Right.
And that's where that's where concurrent licensing came into play.
When
and it was a good play.
Yeah. Because if you're a 24/7 shop, you don't need everybody on it from 9 to 5 because a lot of people work the other 2 shifts as well.
Well, and keep in mind the examples that you're providing right now should already be commonplace as far as how you're doing the business. This is not specifically just because we're doing this migration or transition to another system.
Right.
This should be already in place. This should be part of your metrics, right? Because when you're talking about optimization in this case, renewals, it doesn't matter. We could talk about Adobe, use
Yeah.
PDF Reader or Adobe Acrobat. Okay, that's just one example. You can talk about how you're using the Adobe Suite, right? To your point, it could be different types of your 365 licenses, how it's being sent, what you're giving vendors versus what you have internally, different type of licensing, right? It could be Microsoft projects, simple as that, who actually receives it, who really needs it. These are activities that, we're talking about, but this should be commonplace already. But as we know, commonplace isn't always in common knowledge, or common knowledge is not always common application. Let me say it that way, right?
Now, I want a caveat to a Microsoft project. People better realize that it dies September 30th of this year. And if you do not convert your project plans to MS Planner, you will not be able to open your project files.
Oh, cool.
Excuse me.
So that one did come down the pike earlier this year. And I'd like to do a little bit more about suites. Some companies will say suite is by per name only. So you can't break your bundle, say, well, this one's going to cover this person, this is going to cover this person. So watch what your suite rights are.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. Now, there's another question that just came in. It's a little bit off topic, but I think it's very critical as well, right? It was about AI. So add AI into the discussion, right? Is AI going to impact Ham and Sam and discovery tools or the ELP creation and managing the whole process end to end? How do we adapt the coming of the new capability? AI as an analyst. I think is a great question, actually. And from a transition, we have to keep this in mind because there's some criterion that may or may not be effective with the Freshworks versus what you say you had ServiceNow. It's just going to vary. What's some thoughts on this question? Because there's multiple aspects to it too, multiple different areas.
Oh, for sure, yeah. And at some point, it's going to, at some point, there's going to be a need to leverage AI in order to manage the number of products, for instance, that are going to end up being in your environment, and understanding the rules for each of those publishers versus, or multiplied by products, multiplied by the various different license terms and conditions. So I think that it should definitely enhance the capability. If you just look at the volume of those, right, at some point, it's very difficult for a person to manage all of that. Even if you have a team of like 10 or 20 asset managers, it's still going to become difficult to manage all of that. AI is going to be leveraged for sure. And there are a number of applications that can be put in place for that.
If you have your dashboards working correctly, I don't see how AI is going to be as much of an impact, because if you're already viewing your data right, again, I am not necessarily AI compliant to begin with, so I may not know the right question to ask. And in asking the wrong question, I may end up in a worse position than I had been before. That's what I have on that.
Well, that's also about validation, right? And I think we need to use some validation anytime we're bringing AI into the picture because of those assumptions being made. We've got to document and validate, okay, is it calculated correctly? Because at this point, you can't just trust AI. Alexander Golev talked about this a while back. He said, does articles, right? He had one of his customers that actually does software position. They leveraged AI and they were consulting with him as well. And he says, why'd you guys do that? Well, it was easy and management wanted to get out the door, et cetera. He says, well, do you want me to review it? We already gave it to the vendor.
Oh, no.
They were off by $1 million on the vendor.
There's a cost if you're off. Yeah.
That's in addition, that's in excess of where they should have been, right? Because how AI calculated. So to your point, yes, it's becoming more prevalent, more understanding, more clarity, put that in place. But let's back up. There's another part to this question, right? Okay. The second part to this question is, will the technology we're bringing on board be able to help with AI or not? I will say I don't have enough information to actually answer that question specifically, because how you're looking at the vendors, all the tool vendors, right? I'll say tool vendors, they're all leveraging AI. They all say AI is in there, but the relevancy is going to be dependent upon how you're testing the product.
The testing, the QA, and the QC is very important. And it doesn't matter. If you're doing it with people versus if you're doing it with AI, either way, you still have to have some of those quality controls in place, no matter what, right? If you're just going to be dependent on AI, then you more so need to be checking what's coming out of that system. Or developing checks and controls around that, no matter what.
And I think Andrew just brought a great point.
Yeah.
Right. Add AI and Cmdb to your discussion. This is the discussion with the vendor. I'll work with that assumption that's in place. Absolutely right. Right. That's dead on. Because when you do that, it's you're already working with the vendor anyways to bring on the product. Say, you know what? I just need to know if you can do it or can't do it, because then I can figure out what I need to do.
Right.
Myself.
Well, you remember the discussion that we had? I think it was about maybe 2 weeks back, right? And think in terms of the development model, right? Dev, test, prod, right? Nothing that you're going to do with AI should go into prod unless you have fully vetted that, fully vetted those tools and fully vetted the application of AI, in a dev environment first, so that you can play test and kind of get it tuned up. And then in your testing environment, you ensure that their error is controlled and that this isn't affecting anything else within the environment where you're going to apply the output, etc. And then it doesn't go to production until it goes through all of that.
Well, so let me ask you both questions. This brings up I saw a Gartner webinar earlier this week. It kind of brings up this question, but I'm just going to ask you point. It's kind of a yes or no answer on this one. Very short. Do you guys consider yourselves asset management auditors?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I would. I just want you to answer for yourself, right? And the reason why I asked that is when I looked at it was an AI and IT discussion that happened within Gartner earlier this week, right? It's one of their free webinars. So if you want to go look at it, go for it. It was rather interesting. It got weird at times, but some of these discussions do get weird.
But driving it.
Yeah. So here's the final result. I thought it was rather interesting, very telling. What they also communicate with in that webinar is auditing. What the question I just asked, auditing and asset management is more critical than ever now, ever. Mm-hmm. If you don't know how to audit with an asset management, you better learn how. It's not a tool. It's not a process. It's the whole how you apply that, right? And that's become more critical than anything else. Go for it.
Yeah, you remember you made that point not that long ago, earlier in this conversation. This should be something that you're doing as business as usual. You should be doing it all the time. You should be doing it frequently, right? So if you're not doing it at all, you're just not doing proper asset management. There's just no way.
Especially being a process owner, bringing something up a company never had. So if you're working from one software to another, like what the discussion is, what if your asset management team had only done spreadsheets? They've never worked with any kind of software before that. Without a process owner figuring out how we do everything in an audit point of view, it's going not necessarily fail, but it's going to be wonky. It's not going to work right because you have to look at the whole ball of wax and chunk and sequence the little separate areas and how they fit in a whole.
Oh, it's a great point. Great point. And I wanted to bring that up because I'm finding that's the largest risk we currently have in our discipline. Is we have folks that have been taught how to, I'll say, crank the technical wrench and tools, which is typical to have. You've got some process parts, but I'll say the process has not been very prevalent in general. We talk about process, but we talk about high level. We don't get in the granularities. And being able to audit the entire set of activities, I'm just going to use different terminology so we differentiate the two, it's not easy. I mean, you need someone who's seasoned to do that. You don't need in all due respect, we need junior analysts. So, but you don't need a junior analyst to be performing that, because you need someone who's experienced to avoid getting the risk of the risk of your organization that you have a total failure about to dump on you at any aspect. Go for it.
Well, let's think of it like this. All right, you're not necessarily going to have a high dollar analyst doing all the work, right? But what you'll do is you'll maybe have them give a junior analyst the guidance and say, all right, now go away and do this work. You go do this work for, like, I don't know, $50 an hour, right? And then when it comes time to review the output product of the work and the process that they use, that's when you're going to put that in front of a $75 an hour senior analyst or $100 an hour senior analyst to say, all right, does the process look good? Does the output look good? Are there any areas of concern? Can I tell my junior analyst, I want you to go back and I want you to fine tune these aspects, and let's see if we can increase the quality of the output. Right. And then once you have them working like that, and you have the senior analyst doing work that should be falling to a senior analyst, then you're going to have a much better process. It's going to cost you less too.
Well, I was thinking about if you have an analyst that does the IMLP or ALPM, whatever it is, from IBM.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And it's set up. All they're doing is pulling a report.
Yep.
Okay? That's all they're doing. Then you give them a new contract to start reading something about maybe an in-house or a SaaS. If they don't get to read the contract and they only apply it, they may not know how to do all the applications because they're just expecting a report.
Absolutely.
I mean, they're going to have to find a way to vet that out.
IMLT, yeah.
Report. Yeah, ILNT is the product.
Yeah.
That's
So,
the tool.
how did somebody set up? How will we train? The turnover rate is so fast. By the time you get your new analyst, the other analyst has already been out the door and they walked away with all the intellectual information.
Oh.
That's a good point too. Yeah, that's a very good point.
No,
that's a very good point.
There's a term for hiring, though. They aren't supposed to be taking anything outside of the organization. If they do,
well, no, but they're not staying in the organization. Everybody's so afraid of losing their job, they don't write things down.
Oh, this is such a big topic. Yeah. Why don't you ever record your processes? Because secret. I don't want to get over.
I don't want you.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. Keep it tight to the chest.
Yeah, right.
Why document it? Yeah. Because we need to reinvent it 20 times. Come on. It's good.
Yeah.
Well, we're at the top of the hour. This has been an honorable. I've really enjoyed the discussion. Been very active online as well as amongst here. As it always is, this is a blast. I love doing this. And as we wrap up our topic, as far as the accidental seem to be for the SAM audit, and working through from helping create an audit shield for ourselves, what are some what's that 15-second final nugget you want to provide everyone here, Deanna?
Whatever you do anything, always think as if you're creating it for an audit. Don't just do something and think, okay, I'm doing this and no one cares. We always care. We don't know when we're going to get audited, but always look at, do you have your I's dotted and your T's crossed? Are your ducks in a row? Always work towards audit.
Yeah, you should be doing this as just regular everyday practice. I mean, this is the accounting function, right? This is where it starts, really. And then you can extend that, right? But always, like Deanna said, you're looking for the greatest confidence that you're going to have in the data that's going to support your defense for an audit situation. And it's also going to adequately inform your finance department and your leadership around what it is that you're acquiring and how much value you're getting out of it. So that aside from just the audit concerns and compliance, this serves the organization in these ways.
I just want to add one other thing. If you see that if there's a gap, don't keep your mouth shut. Let somebody know. Dig into
it. Talk. The internal team.
Communication is key. That means outward communication, by the way.
See something, say something.
Yeah. Exactly. It's okay to raise your hand. And if you get slapped down about it, just keep moving forward because you already know that it needs to be heard.
Yeah.
If it feels like it's that it's also, I use it the 5-second rule by Brene Brown, right? Count to 5, make the decision, how you communicate it, push it out there. It's done. From there, you will determine those next steps, right?
Okay.
But if you feel it's there, if there's any reason to communicate it. Don't look back.
Yeah.
Don't second guess it. If someone says, "Yeah, well, we don't want to do this," someone else will deal with it. If it's already on your mind, get it out there, right? It's huge. Because it's not a hero. It's not even trying to, okay, well, you want to be the hero. It's like, no, I'm just communicating because it need of awareness. It has nothing to do with me being a hero, right? And
What's
that's
that
key.
thing about regret? There's a quote about regret that I once, and I remember it. It's better to regret something that you have done than to regret something that you haven't done.
Ooh, I like it. I love that.
Yeah. I think it came from a Butthole Surfers song lyric from way back in the 80s.
I like it.
But still.
That's awesome. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Deanna. Thank you, everyone online. This has been a great session. Absolutely. We'll continue on Monday with our series as far as the accidental Cmdb. Bring that up. We've been a lot of great progress. If you've not seen it, hey, look at the previous post. We're going to have some, you'll see some posts from me actually also coming out very soon on this, and being able to say, leverage it, use it, that next step. And also realize if you're not the right person in the role, you're going to struggle in this, raise your hand and say you need help. That's the most important part. Or if you need around the community, put yourself out there, IT Service Management Co-op, right there. Join a community that actually will support you without the vendor influence, et cetera, to help you go that next step. That's what we're all about. That's it for the ITAM Kitchen for this week. For the moment, for this episode, thank you, everyone, for being here. Great. Thanks again, Deanna and Rob. We'll see everyone next week, and we'll talk to you then. Thanks, guys.
Catch you on the flip side.
Yep.